Welcome back, everybody. We hope that you had an opportunity to nourish both your bodies and your minds with the lunch bites. But now we move on to the next session. Applying any new technology-based solution is all about the follow-through, a continuous process of refinement and expansion to new use cases. You know you are onto something when you can build out a clinical program across a large health system. Today, we are lucky enough to have on hand representatives from 2 of the nation's preeminent healthcare organizations. Our panelists today are Naporsha Ashford, RN with Ascension Health, Rochelle Longo, Associate Vice President of Telemedicine at Ochsner Health, Monica Weibel, Associate Program Manager at Ochsner Health, and our moderator today is Lindsay DeBernardi, AvaSure's Clinical Program Specialist.
Thank you, Andy, and good afternoon to all of you, or good morning, depending on where you are across the nation. We are happy to have you all join us today. I am thrilled to be moderating the change management panel today. As we all know, in healthcare, change is frequent and it's necessary. However, it is never an easy undertaking. So today we're blessed to have Naporsha, Rochelle, and Monica with us today, who have all played a huge part in the continued success of their large-scale AvaSure program. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I want to first start by just asking a very general question, more so of an introduction. I'll have each of you just tell us a little bit about what your role is at the hospital, and then what your role is in the oversight of the AvaSure program. So Rochelle, I'll start with you.
Sure. I am the AVP of Strategic Partnership Solutions for the telemedicine team at Ochsner. I'm responsible for the expansion of our telehealth programs to both Ochsner and non-Ochsner facilities. I have a team that serves as basically like account managers for each of our sites. They're RN by background, and so their role includes both performance and improvement and quality improvement, and the implementation at all of our sites. So we did that for not just the telesitter, but also telestroke and other programs.
Great, thank you.
So I oversee all of that for Ochsner.
Wonderful, thank you. And Monica?
So I am a registered nurse by background in the telemedicine department at Ochsner. I'm the associate program manager for data and bedside education for all of our virtual health programs, which includes the telesitter, as well as our EICUs and our STORT program. And I actually report up to Rochelle.
Thank you. And Naporsha?
Hi, my name is Naporsha. I am the RN manager of the, we call it the VSM Hub, but our telesitter program here in Ascension, Wisconsin. I also sit on a national team. We help to implement these hub and spoke model telesitter programs across Ascension. So we've opened 8, I believe, in the last 3 years across in different ministry markets across Ascension.
Great, thank you. And that kind of leads me into the next question. Just wondering if you could give us an overview of your AvaSure program. Things such as when you went live, how many devices you have, how many sites do you monitor? And Naporsha, I'll start with you because you basically just started on that one.
Sure. So here in Wisconsin, we monitor 9 sites currently. We have 109 devices here. Across Ascension, though, we have over 500 devices. Like I said, we're in 8 states, Michigan being our largest market with over 200 devices they have there that they monitor. And I've helped kind of had a little hand in implementing all of those programs.
Yes, and you've done a wonderful job. And Monica, would you like to share?
Sure. So we've had the telesitter program since I think 2016. We started with 32 cameras. We now have 16 facilities with 109 cameras that we monitor in the state of Louisiana.
Anything to add to that, Rochelle?
Nope,
That
I
covers
think that she covered it.
All right. And then, as you know, generally, once we implement and go live with a program of this caliber, of this large scale, of which you both have at your organizations, you identify soon areas where changes may be necessary. So my question is, as you begin preparing to implement changes to your organization as it pertains to your telesitter program, can you talk a little bit about what stakeholders are at the table and why it's important to have them involved? And I'll start with you, Rochelle.
Sure. So, I think what's most important is really identifying who is going to be the drivers of the change, who's going to be impacted the most. And, for us, I think that the CNO is a great person, or your nursing leader is obviously a great person to have at the table. Also, members of our falls committee, quality improvement or process improvement team members are important. But I think it's also important to have members from the bedside, members who are going to be involved in creating that change, creating the piece that's actually going to push the change. It's really got to involve the people who are going to be impacted the most. And I think that's where change really has to occur.
Mm-hmm. And Monica?
Yeah, just to, echo on what Rachel said, what we try to do is get all of them involved, get them excited. We have multiple meetings with them before we ever go on site with the cameras to do staff training so that they can start talking about it and how it works and how it's going to help them there at the bedside, and just kind of continue to build up how we're going to come help them and the change that they will hopefully see as we go through this process in helping the patients.
Good. And Portia?
I'm sure. I have kind of two avenues that we go through for change process here. Our program is run nationally, so we're run by a national team over Ascension, so it overarches all of our different ministry markets, so across the states. So we have a regional director that kind of closely works with us, and then I have a senior director. So we filter things up through that way. And then I also filter things locally here. So I work with the CNO group, the risk management team, the quality team. The falls team is pretty much our biggest champions. I attend all the falls meetings. They are the ones who go out on the floor, the clinical staff who are out there rallying for our program the most. So that's who I tend to filter a lot of our information or our data through. They seem to take our data and, use it for good, or, take cases and say, hey, if this patient had a telesitter on, maybe the patient wouldn't have failed, or it would have been witnessed, things of that sort. So I think the little guys are who help us the most, but I think keeping the CNO group and the directors in tune with what's going on is also important.
That's so great. I love how you say the little guys. I've had the opportunity to be on site with Portia actually recently, and I did witness the remarkable culture that she did create within her hub and her team. And so my next question is surrounding that. Can you talk about how your organization's culture had you set up for success when implementing the telesitter program? And how does it continue to contribute to your success as you evolve your program? Portia?
Sure. I'll start back from the beginning. Our organization made it pretty easy for us to be successful with the implementation of our program. They created this agile group that was comprised of technical subject matter experts and clinical subject matter experts. And we actually flew out to AvaSure and we met with them for 3 days, and we created a playbook. And that playbook detailed exactly how to implement a program of this sort, implement it quickly. So it gave each of the markets kind of a step-by-step guide on how to be successful in doing this. And along the way, as we found things that didn't work well or things that worked better, we went back and we tweaked the playbook to mimic that. I think having something of that sort, that caliber in the beginning really set us up for success, because we had all the tools that we needed. And then if we still need things, they still have a team of subject matter experts that we can go to for help. We can go and we can ask, hey, how are other markets doing this? Or what's working, in Alabama that's not working in Wisconsin, and we can kind of compare and contrast. So I think that that's very helpful. Taking the things that have worked best, the best practices from one market and implementing them in another market is also very helpful. So we have those resources kind of across the board. So I manage here in Wisconsin, but I also know the manager that's in Michigan. And sometimes she has some best practices that she sees there, and it helps us here. So I think just having a program where it's not just here, I'm not just local, it's national. So we learn from different places and we see different things. When we come together and we take those ideas and we build upon them.
Thank you for sharing that. And Monica, I know you have been involved with the AvaSure program very closely since the beginning as well. Can you speak to us on the culture that was created there?
So Ochsner has been really supportive of our telemedicine department, in general, and their investment within our team, and our structure is what really helps us with our successful model. We're structured in a way to be able to focus on the product design, because we have a team that works on that, and then a team that works on the implementation with the site. And then we have the operations leads at our hub with with their own team members, in each of the different groups that we house in our bunker. The team that I work on, we're all RNs, and that's our focus, is how can we help change what's going on at the bedside to better support our fellow nurses as well as serve our patients better. So some of the things that we do, I have a monthly newsletter that I send out to all of our site leads. We have a meeting with all of our sites every other month where we discuss, things that are going on. We do some root cause analysis if we need to. We talk about our best practices, and, sometimes things that work at one site might work at another. So all of our sites, I get them together so that they can talk about things that work, things that don't work, what they've tried, and that way they can share those ideas and bring it back to the staff and their fall committees, and work on those process improvement things, with input from other sites. And I think that has been one of our greatest strengths, is getting them together to share ideas.
That's great. And Rochelle, any comments on that? I know you do a lot with communication, from the hub to touching all those spoke sites. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, I was just going to add, I think what makes us a little unique is the fact that, and I'm sorry, Jen isn't here to add a little bit of her piece, but we have another half to our telemedicine team that focuses on the development side of telemedicine. And they also own the operations half of the sitter piece. And so the bunker team actually sits on its own aside from me. And then we are able to bridge. So Monica's role sort of bridges the bunker to the site. And so we're able to focus solely on the operations and then solely on our sites, but also take and bridge those together. And so it's really nice that each gets their own focus, but we're also able to bring it together. And so they each kind of get, I guess they feel really important. They each get a little piece of, like, I have my own person. The sites love that they have Monica, and the bunker feels as they have their own telemedicine person. they each have an associate program manager, just like Monica. They have one as well. And so they have someone who works on developing new ideas and things like that. So I think that helps to make us a little unique.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then I do know this is kind of to Monica and Rochelle. Rochelle, I know at the initially you weren't heavily involved with the implementation, and Monica, I believe you were. But Rochelle, you certainly helped spread and scale the program across your system as it relates to evolvement. So Rochelle, I'll start with you on this question. How do you get buy-in across the organization? And how do you develop trust with those who are hesitant at adopting the changes?
So I think, it goes back to what I said previously about, just understanding the stakeholders and who your audience is and what's in it for them and how the change will affect them. And so, if I'm going to a small rural hospital and I understand, I look at their data. And so a lot of times for me, I'm going in there and I'm looking at, if this is a 25-bed critical access hospital, they probably need 1 or 2 cameras. They may be paying for, one sitter a day. For them, this is the ROI is financial, right? Because now the cost is going to be cut tremendously. And so I may be talking to their CFO. So my buy-in is going to be with their CFO. And so it's really about, again, knowing your stakeholders, knowing who the right person is, knowing where to go to get the buy-in, and then just really understanding how it's going to affect them and talking to the right people.
Mm-hmm. And Portia?
I agree with what both with what she said. You do have to know who your stakeholders are, who's gonna be the driver or the person who can implement the change the greatest. We work with kind of our CNOs or our directors across the organization to get the word across for how important this program is and how it can help. Even talking to sometimes the hub staff here and letting them know, where the culture of nursing is going, I think helps. Letting them know how we're at a nursing shortage and just how valuable they are, even though they're unseen and they're kind of unheard. We're kind of stuck off in a corner, but we're still valuable. And I think that helps a ton.
Thank you. And Monica, do you have anything to add?
I think I've been very fortunate. When I started with telemedicine at Ochsner, we were focused on stroke, and that's where I started. So in a lot of our facilities over time, I've gotten to know, the CNOs and, the directors and the leaders of the units where our cameras are. And I think that has helped tremendously. Their staff is used to seeing me, come in and out. Their leaders have no problems whatsoever with reaching out to me. And I think that has helped tremendously with their buy-in and getting the staff, excited and on board as we, work through the implementation process.
Mm-hmm. So the next 2 questions, I feel like we get very frequently when we are on calls with organizations trying to implement change or at the beginning of how are we going to make this change? What are some common obstacles you've come across when implementing change, and how did you overcome those obstacles? Rochelle?
Honestly, I think for me, the biggest obstacle has always been a misperception about how this change is going to affect those involved. I think if you can get the stakeholders or those involved to really openly discuss how they perceive the change, I think it's all about open discussion. And if you can get them to openly discuss how they perceive this change, you can probably get a better buy-in, because 99% of the time I have found that it's more than likely a misperception about how the change is going to affect them.
Yeah, And Portia?
Most people are just resistant because it's change.
Yeah, you're right.
Definitely.
You're right.
Yep. What I've also found is buy-in is the most frequent obstacle. I think if you can get a great management team behind your program from each of the sites, that the leaders, if the leaders are buying into the program, it'll trickle down to the clinical staff. I have some sites where the leaders are gung-ho. They're always reaching out to me. They're always stating how they appreciate the program, and the floor staff there, you can really see the difference between the sites that have leadership that isn't as vocal about the program, or they don't reach out, they don't return emails. So I think leadership buy-in to me is probably the biggest obstacle, but I think it's also the biggest help. Once you get a leader to recognize the value of the program, they push it so hard that the staff, eventually they buy in as well. So I think a good leadership, a good management team is always important.
Yeah. And Monica?
Just to echo what has been said, and sometimes seeing is believing with the bedside staff. Once I've gone in and I've done training and I've worked with them and I've asked all those questions and tried to answer them, to alleviate some of their concerns about the change. Sometimes it's just that alarm going off at the bedside, and that them getting to that patient and the patient not falling, and them going, and that light bulb kind of goes off, and they're like, wow, this really works. It is going to help us. And then that just kind of, it trickles out, among the bedsides that are still present.
Yes. And then you just brought me to my next question. So I'll start with you, Monica, on this. What tools, training, and practices are you utilizing to set your team up for success?
So we use a lot of things. So like I said, I do have a monthly newsletter that I send out that I ask the leaders to post in their units, in their departments. We have a meeting every other month. I'm very active with as many of the fall committees at each of the sites as they will allow me to be. And the sites where they allow me to be active are our biggest utilizers. I do like to do on-site hands-on training with the bedside staff and try to touch as many of them as possible, to get them engaged, to answer all of those questions. We meet once a month. Janelle is the manager of the telesitters, and she has supervisors now, which are extremely helpful and beneficial at helping the staff. They actually go out with me to help with the bedside training. They become that face. I've been asked so many times, is there really somebody on the other side of that camera? And, having those supervisors with me at skills fairs, at staff meetings, and doing training puts that face behind the camera, because all, the patient in the bedside, they just hear a voice, talking. They don't get to see a face. And so that is definitely helping, with getting them out there so that people can see it is a real person there that's helping you take care of your patient. It's not just a voice or a computer on the other side. And then, just that constant retraining and, reaching out to touch them when they have issues, problems, and concerns, that availability. And, Janelle's supervisors help me with that a lot, as they are, helping the sitter team, make that connection with the patient and the staff.
That's great. And Rochelle, do you have anything to add on to that?
I think she covered it. I mean, I would just add, I think, again, our structure, the way that we have the two teams on our telemedicine structure, help to support it a little bit stronger. But otherwise, I think Monica covered it.
All right. And now, Portia.
I'll echo what she said about the nursing staff being trained, or going out to train the nursing staff. We also here, when we train our new monitor techs, because I think it kind of starts with them. If they're trained correctly and they're showing their value then the buy-in will be greater. So we use the AvaSure provides online modules that we use, the AvaSure skills checklist, the monitor competency tool. Those are all provided by AvaSure when you go live. We also created our own checklist here of local processes, like using the phone system or which hospitals require different things. We monitor suicide patients here. So we have a suicide checklist that goes over the things that you monitor for if you're looking at a suicide patient. Sitting our new hires with a preceptor to make them feel comfortable, making sure that they're comfortable before we putting them out on their own, letting them know that no questions are dumb. Everybody has a question at some point in time, and no question is a dumb question. They're all legitimate. Then we use yearly competencies. We use the advanced telesitter modules that we get from AvaSure with the communications and the elderly population online module. And then we also had, just recently, we were able to have AvaSure come out and kind of revisit some of our underutilizing sites. They went, they retrained nurses, they did clinical champion classes again, revisited with the falls committees or with whatever teams were meeting while they were on site. And that was a big help for us. So.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that's a help, because we really do enjoy getting out there on site and seeing everybody face to face and working through some of those process improvements. So I know all of you, all three of you, are very involved and in tune to process improvement. And I do know at Ochsner, you kind of took a pause in the beginning a little bit and have revamped. I think AvaSure came out and you did a revamp of your program, and were very, very successful and initiated hub and spoke steering committees. And it really was successful. So as your telesitter program evolves and you implement new phases, new processes, new use cases, there can always be disruptions in the workflow. So can you talk to me a little bit about what steps you do and take to reduce the number of disruptions for both staff and patients when you are doing these process improvements and changes? Rochelle?
Sure. And, I think this comes for any of the programs that we implement. We try to go in and understand what is the process as it exists now, and what is the process that we're trying to implement, and where are the changes, and where can we have any synergies. And so how can we make it as little of a change as possible? And so I think that's where it's important, is trying to find some synergies where you can and do as little change as possible. And I think we've been really successful in that where we can. I'll let Monica probably speak to it a little bit more, but I think that's one of the things that we do try to go in. We do an assessment on the front end. We don't just go in and say, here's our process and here's what we're going to do. We go in and do an assessment on the front end.
Monica, I'll have you follow up on that.
Yeah, I think that since we've instituted our every other month discussions with the site, it's a kind of a round table where I present, for the first 5 or 10 minutes, some of the new stuff, what we're seeing, what I'm hearing through the different falls committees, and then I open it up to a roundtable discussion. I think that has really helped with that. Some of the things that we've asked in making changes is more communication, more meaningful communication between the bedside and the sitter. We found that's really key. Our sitters are a part of that daily care team. So, little things like putting the sitter's name on the whiteboard every day where the patient can see who's talking to them over that camera, the voice in the sky. Our telesitters, Janelle is working on totally revamping that. They have an onboarding process. They have access to the AvaSure training events. I talked about the supervisors that Janelle has just recently hired and then going out on site with us. And then the sitters, the supervisors, they send an email out to all the telesitter unit leaders at the beginning, well, at the end of each of their shifts, that tell them, how many cameras they have in use, which cameras are available for use, just to kind of to keep that focus of what is available to them and can be used. Epic tools that we encourage use for who are your best candidates, and it's just that follow-up on how to use them and continue to make those changes so that we can continue to improve.
Very good. And Portia, how about steps that you take?
I'm sure. I try to look at trends, looking at adverse events that have occurred, to see how we can implement change in that aspect. Also, when we do make a change, I try to make sure that staff know well in advance that a change is coming and why. So I'll create an S-bar, send that out to the CNO group, the directors, the FALS team. I kind of have a list of my stakeholders that I like to send things to. So just explaining to them why things are changing, what we feel the change will affect, how it will help the program. Our most recent change, which was big for our clinical staff here, was we changed how we admitted patients to the system. So we used to have the staff had to fill out a form and they had to fax it to us. Then they had to call to make sure we got the fax. It was cumbersome for the floor staff. So I sat with my leads and we said, hey, well, how about we take some of that responsibility away from them, and they can now call us. They can call us and they'll just give us the admission over the phone. So we took about 4 steps away from the bedside nurse, which was huge for buy-in for them. They were so excited. The bedside nurses were so ecstatic that they now had 4 less steps, to admit their patient. But prior to this, I met with our lead team. I met with the FALS teams to see, if this will be helpful. Am I barking up the wrong tree here? Things of that sort. And then I just made sure that they were aware that the change was coming, giving out tips on how to make the change the easiest. Like, hey, laminate a few admission sheets and leave them at the nurses' station so that they're accessible to the nurses, things of that sort. So also, when we make a change, I like to explain the why to my team. My team is a big, oh, well, why are we doing this? Or who is this helping? And how is this going to, we're doing more work here. Why am I doing more work? So I think just keeping them in the know, keeping them, when they know why something is happening, they're more in tune with accepting that change and adapting to change. And it worked really well here. So.
And then to follow up on that, once the change is implemented, sometimes tweaks have to be made, right? How do you evaluate if things need to be adjusted? And how do you know if the change was a success? Are there tools you use to monitor, if that change has been successful? Rochelle?
Yeah, so I'm going to lean on Monica for this, for the in-depth answers, but it's truly a lot of follow-ups in the beginning when we first implement the change, but it has to do with ongoing follow-ups that we do throughout the entire time as a partner with any of our solutions. But Monica can speak to the specifics of the tools that she uses.
Monica?
So it's that continual follow-up and feedback loop, allowing the sites to tell us what is working for them, what is not working for them, as well as the telesitter, the bunker input for, how is it working for them? And, how is that interaction? Is it causing, more anxiety or stress, for either side? And then how can we tweak it to to help take that away as we work through, getting the kinks out. I think it definitely is, that feedback loop from both, what's going on at the bedside and what's going on with the sitters in the bunker, and then finding that middle of the road ground that makes it easiest for both sides to take care of the patient.
Mm-hmm. And Portia, anything to add on to that?
I agree. I like to check with my staff. I meet with my leads once a month. We have a pretty in-depth meeting where they get to hear the little, the water cooler talk, and they're out there with the monitor staff. So they pretty much know if things are working or if there's an issue, or so I like to speak with them first and foremost. They'll let me know what things aren't working. If they see tweaks that need to be made, they have their opinions about things, and we kind of come together, and I use my critical thinking them, kind of guide their thoughts, like, hey, we're doing it this way because of this. So if we think differently, sometimes it'll help. The falls teams are big part of my change control group. I meet with them. I meet with all of our local, like each site fall team, and then I also meet with our state falls team. So that's very helpful. They always know when things aren't working. I can't go to the CNO and say, hey, we made this change. Do you think it's working? They wouldn't have a clue. So I think the members of the falls teams, those are the people, they're the PCAs or the CNAs that are working with the patient, the nurses that are working with the patient, and then maybe a leader or two. So I think that those people are invaluable in their input for that.
That's great. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to go into a little Q&A from some questions that I received from your audience. And this is my favorite question. I try to ask this on every phone call I have with my customers, with all of you. I think the answer to this really solidifies why we do what we do and why you all work so hard to do what you do to keep your patients safe. And the question to that is, do you have one or two really good catches that you can share with us that has kept a patient safe at your organization? No, Portia?
Sure. The most recent one that I just seen was one of our monitor techs was watching a patient actually for falls, and she noticed that the patient was injecting actually the visitor with a medication, and then turned around and injected the medication into themselves. So not only did she catch the patient injecting the medication, she caught the visitor receiving an unknown substance as well. We were able to activate the stat alarm and get staff in there to help right away. This could have prevented any overdoses. There's tons of clinical outcomes from taking unknown drugs. So that was a great catch. We also recently had a catch where we were again watching a patient for falls, and this patient attempted suicide and wrapped a cord around their neck. So that patient was not even a suicide patient. Turned out to be suicidal, and we were there to catch that before anything detrimental happened to that patient.
That's incredible. Great work. Monica, do you have a great catch story to share with us?
I do have a couple. So actually this past Friday night, a patient had a grand mal seizure and almost slipped out of the bed. And the sitter was able to use the stat alarm as well as calling to the unit to alert the staff. The staff was able to call our rapid response team overhead to be able to get into the patient's room and help them as they were coming out of this grand mal seizure. And then we recently had a sitter that caught a family member abusing the patient, and the sitter called the nurse instead of turning on the stat alarm. She called the nurse and spoke directly with the nurse. And unfortunately, as we have to do, the patient did have to have a report to CPS, but they are now hopefully getting the care and the help that they need as, an elderly patient that was being abused by a family member.
Great. And Rochelle, did you have any in mind?
I don't. I'm not as close to it as Monica is, but I think I'll just add that this can show you, although for us, the program is to monitor patients for falls, but obviously we are seeing other safety issues or things that are happening, and we're able to have other catches, and our staff is alert to other things. And I think it's just an exciting program, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
Great. All right, I'm going to take a few minutes now and just give you some of our questions that you received from the audience. This one is for Naporsha at Ascension. How is AvaSure used for suicidal patients at Ascension? What does your checklist look like?
Sure. So here at Ascension, we utilize AvaSure for low to moderate risk suicide patients only. The checklist, what I did was I took the inpatient checklist. So the in-sitter room, the sitter that would be sitting at the bedside, I took their checklist and I revamped it to make it work for my sitters here. So we look for patients having their belongings that they shouldn't. We look at patient visitors. We look at ensuring that the room is as safe as possible. So if there's things in the rooms that we notice a patient receiving a razor one day and we call and say, hey, that patient doesn't get a razor, they're on suicide precautions. We look at the tray that's being delivered to the room. Are they getting the right type of utensils? You know, they shouldn't have regular utensils. They need to have plasticware. And that's pretty much the basis of what the checklist is. Just looking at environmental concerns, making sure that my techs are aware of things that patients tend to do before, attempting suicide. We make sure the patient doesn't go into the bathroom independently. Those patients usually can get up and walk around the room, which isn't an issue, but we don't want them to be out of sight. So those are pretty much the basis of what the checklist entails. I took pretty much what an in-room sitter would be looking for, and change some verbiage to make it make sense for a person who was not in a room.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you for that. And this question is for either Rochelle or Monica. How is the EICU used at Ochsner, and what infrastructure is needed?
That's
So
a good
our
question.
EICU is, so we actually have two separate programs for our EICUs. And we have a bunker of registered nurses that are, they're ICU. I think they have a minimum of 5 years of ICU experience to work for the EICU. And we use the product to monitor and assist the patients in those ICU beds. And we have it across, I don't even know how many sites right now. But, our ICUs do on occasion use the AvaSure telesitter to help them with some of their, their more mobile patients, the ones that, are not necessarily trached or are vented, just to help that gentle reminder of, the patient not to get out of the bed, not to pull on their lines. Because of course, we all know that those ICU patients do have a tremendous number of lines on occasion. Mm-hmm. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I'll add, so EICU is a trademark name for the Philips brand. And so that's the Philips infrastructure. And that actually takes the Philips EICU, and that we have at our larger facilities, which are the bigger Ochsner hospitals. And in our smaller community hospitals, we have a smaller version of ICU monitoring, and it does not have the EICU brand, but we are doing some monitoring capabilities at those hospitals as well. So if anybody wants further information, they can reach out to either Monica or I for that. It's a little bit different.
That's great. I'm
hard to describe on here.
Yeah, I'm certain you'll get some questions around that. So thank you for sharing that. This one is for Naporsha. Could you expand a little bit on your lead monitor staff role and ways in which that role has helped the monitor staff?
Sure. So we have kind of a clinical ladder here. So we have a charge tech role, we have a lead tech role, and then I have a supervisor. So our charge techs are kind of in charge of managing the shift. They kind of volunteer for that role. They answer the phone, do admissions, they filter phone calls, things of that sort. The lead techs are kind of shift supervisors. So when they're working, they take the charge shift role as well, but they're also able to do just-in-time coaching. They can do, coaching and counseling, kind of the corrective action, start to take the corrective action path with our staff. They're more versed in the telephone etiquette and speaking with the nurses, or if they need to reach out to kind of the gatekeepers at the hospital or the charge nurse at the hospital. I tend to have my lead techs take that role on. And that's pretty much the gist of their responsibility. They do staffing, they do the sheets for the next shift to see. We have 9 stations here, so sometimes it gets a little tricky, making sure that each person has the same amount of suicide patients, making sure one person's station isn't too busy, and then another person has 6 patients who are just laying in bed for their shift. So kind of keeping it equal that way, making sure they put the admissions correctly, things of that sort. Kind of like what a charge tech would do on a nursing unit.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. How do you empower frontline staff or monitor staff to be positive drivers of change? Monica?
I think it's giving them that knowledge that their supervisor has their back and that they know what the policy is and can speak to it, and having that supervisory role, someone there that they can bounce those things off of, and help them with engaging that bedside staff has been tremendous in helping the sitters become empowered. That is something that we continue to work on with the telesitter staff, is they can come back to the nurse and say, this isn't appropriate. We might need to look at doing a one-on-one sitter for this patient because of X, Y, and Z. We've had 12 alarms in the past 3 hours because the patient is just that physically active, that or maybe their family's getting them up, or that kind of thing, and that one-on-one sitter, a better option. But we've given we're working on giving the bunker sitters those tools to empower them to back the bedside staff and be, I think maybe we should look at this, or I think we should look at that. And I think that is tremendous in giving the bunker staff the confidence in their ability to help and take care of the patient.
That's great. Did anybody else have any thoughts on that question?
I would just add, I think it goes back to what Portia said earlier too. It's just reminding them of the why. I think that when they believe in the why, it will also help them to drive it as well.
That's so great.
Definitely. And communication, I think, is a big driver here. Keeping those lines of communication open, ensuring that they have the tools that they need throughout their shift, and they know what their resources are. They know who they should be reaching out to, and escalation procedures are all very important in that.
So great. Thank you all for your time today. I know it's busy in everybody's lives. We really appreciate you being here on the Change Management panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. What an absolutely fantastic discussion on use cases and best practices. And I think it's so encouraging to see the level of patient accountability and how that can be optimized through, a company like AvaSure and what they're able to impact on these larger systems. So that's fantastic. Right now, we're going to take a little break to stretch and get ready for our breakouts. So starting at 2 o'clock Eastern, we're going to be offering 3 different breakout sessions. And it's a chance to really zero in on specific issues related to remote video monitoring. Breakout 1 is called Wheeling to Efficiency with Hub and Spoke. Panelists will describe how health systems use centralized monitoring stations and enterprise software to save money, simplify hiring and training, and most importantly, save lives. In breakout 2, monitoring for the long-term acute care and skilled nursing, panelists will share the benefits and success of remote video monitoring in long-term acute care hospital settings in skilled nursing facilities. And then in session 3, how monitor staff help improve nurse productivity. Nurse leaders will discuss the impact of remote video monitoring for overworked staff seeking to focus on their core roles as direct caregivers. So get up, stretch, get a glass of water, come back in 15 minutes, go forth and break out.